Hi, I'm Bozoma Saint John, and my cash confession is I hate shopping, so I actually pay for a stylist.
I want to know what your taste is currently. Like, what is on your list, you know?
Girl, okay, first of all, let's talk about the list, okay? And writing down the list. Delete that list. Oh, my list. The problem is, you're gonna write these things down, and the right person is gonna walk right past you because they don't match some little thing that's on your list. I'm not saying any of your things are little. I think lists are dangerous. They're great for us to get clarity, to really understand what it is that we want and the things we don't want. But I think they can misguide you too. And this is when I get into my spiritual bag also, because it's like, how do you know what God has for you? You think you're smart enough to be able to write it down and be like, God, this is exactly what I want. Okay, that's fantastic. But maybe God has something different for you that you don't even know you need. But we're so busy with the pro and con list that we forget to actually hone the intuition that we have. That is the gift from God. That intuition, you cannot beat it. I tell you, trust me on that. And so my point is that when we make these lists like this, what happens is we get so focused on the detail of that list that we miss the actual blessing. You're not here listening to your intuition. What you need is to listen to your intuition. What you need to do is hone that. And for me, I trust my intuition so clearly. It has not failed me yet. I promise you.
Thank you everyone for coming. My name is Vidette Ajololo. I'm the founder and CEO of this amazing company called Sorta Chale that was birthed in Ghana 4 years ago. We are a curated experiences company. We run travel experiences and events in the continent of Africa. And I'm super excited that you guys are joining us today for our live podcast session, which is actually a Sorta Chale podcast that will be launching very soon in Q4 of 2024. But you guys get behind the scenes because while we are in Accra and people in Accra are amazing and they deserve all the good stuff. But also because my guest is so amazing that I couldn't let her come to Accra and not force her to sit down and meet the people there. So I'm so excited that you guys get to be part of Cashing Up with Vidette, which is the name of the podcast. And guess what? You are the first to know this. And I'm super excited. So before we officially start the podcast, I want to welcome Ms. Bozoma Saint John,
Yes.
who I think this is a good time to clap. Guys, you can definitely
by force
clap.
clapping.
By force.
Wow.
By force. Hey, you deserve by force claps. So for those of you who don't know, which would be shocking if you don't, Bozoma Saint John is, executive the great, CMO of so many amazing companies in the world. We're talking Uber, Netflix, Pepsi, Apple, just to name a few. She's done an excellent job at trailblazing for all of us young women, young men who look up to her as she kind of continues to take over the world. And she has some exciting things that she's doing into the future, which I'm not allowed to speak about, but maybe later you can catch her in chambers and she might want to share. So today's session is love and dating. So essentially, Bozoma will be giving us her perspective on success.
I didn't know that's what I was doing here. I'm out of here.
No. Don't say you're not going anywhere because I'll catch you. It's called Cashing Up with Vidette. So if you run, I'll catch you,
me.
basically.
Okay.
So I'm super excited to dive deep into this for you and with you because you and I have had some, sofa chats. And we've had many sofa chats.
Yes.
So I know that we have a lot to talk about. So now I'm just asking you to bring the sofa conversations to real life.
Public.
Can you do it?
Yeah, sure.
Are you
Let's
sure?
do it. I don't mind.
Okay, perfect.
We'll just figure out how far I could go.
How deep do we need to go?
Yeah.
Okay. So Bozoma, you know what? I think I've introduced you, but you can introduce yourself as well, just to remind those who don't know properly. Because how can I even introduce a woman like you to the extent that needs to be introduced?
Oh, gosh.
So please help me introduce yourself and tell them a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I think because of the nature of the conversation, it's going to be more personal than anything. So maybe I'll start there, which is that I'm a single mom to an amazing 15-year-old girl. Her name is Lael. I became a single mom when my husband died of cancer about 10 years ago. And it's been quite a journey in those 10 years. But I would say that, as far as the intersection of sort of personal and professional, it began way before that, right? It began when I started climbing the corporate ladder and dating, then got married, had baby, it's all of these things are connected. And I think for women, sometimes it can be difficult because we have to choose one or the other. It's very rare that you're able to do both. They tell you can't have everything. And I think even now, of course, in more modern time, you would consider that men should and do have the same pressures, of deciding whether or not to be highly involved in their family or to choose a career path. And so for me, it's like, look, at the times when I have been climbing, you would consider that like, oh, well, I must have had a very easy personal life, in order to do the things that I do. I wrote a book a year and a half ago now, called The Urgent Life, which I decided to write because every publisher wanted me to write the career book, the book that said how to get into the corner office. They wanted me to write about my experiences at the companies that you already mentioned. And they wanted me to write about like basically how to do it. But I didn't think that was going to be possible without talking about my personal life, my personal journey, and it even felt like those two could not be told at the same time because I was afraid that people would skip the pages to try and get like the corporate lessons. Right. Versus like, hey, this is like the personal story that helped me to be who I am. I am a self-proclaimed badass. And correct. And you can't become that without having dealt with personal things that have taken you to the depths, right? There's no way to become fierce without having faced fierce things and conquering them. And so for me, it was really important to tell my personal story first. In the 10 years since Peter died, as you can imagine, it's become even more complicated in sort of the meshing of the personal with like romance and also the corporate career. I mean, because then it's like you're also a mom and you got to deal with that.
Mom.
Yeah, a whole mom, somebody's mother. On top of trying to navigate that. And I would say that even in, the last decade or 12 years or so has really been the rocket ship. The first 10 years were the building blocks, was the foundation building. And then it was like, poof, I took off, And so that trajectory has been even more difficult to navigate. I think people misunderstand and think that the beginnings are the hard part. No, I promise you. It's when these spotlights are on that it becomes tough. And so having to navigate all of that and now making a sharp left after my retirement, I know I look so... After my retirement from the corporate world, has proved to be even trickier in this space. And so I'm navigating yet another pivot, another change in my life.
That's so interesting. And Bozoma, I've read the book. And I was texting you every step through. It was so nice to finally read a book where I knew the author personally. I was like, hey, so what did this mean?
Right.
And you are so transparent about how your personal life intersects with your success. And the one story I really remember in the book was your first boyfriend who actually committed suicide and how that affected you and made you think about urgency. Yeah. So you've always been transparent about your success, but also your love, right?
Yeah.
So as we delve into this, I think the first question I have for you, right, is how has your success played a part in shaping your relationships? If that is just personal, but also romantic.
Yeah. Here's the thing. It's like, I know we're here to talk about love and therefore romance, but you have to also consider all of the relationships. The relationship that I have with my daughter, the relationship I have with my parents, the relationships I have with my siblings, the relationships I have with my best friends, and then the acquaintances and the, you know what I mean? Those are very, very, very tricky to navigate in the work, right? Because on one hand, and I've said this on several occasions, but I'll repeat it here, which is that as your success grows and as you change and develop, so do the relationships around you. We all know and we've probably experienced the times when someone has either accused you of switching up or they've switched up on you, in the ways that make you feel, that make you question whether or not you're doing the right thing. Are you on the right path? Are you a different person in a bad way? Because you can be accused of that. I had members of my own family say that they didn't like the person I was becoming.
Deep.
With the success. And I'm like, wait, which part don't you like? Is it the more confident version, the one who won't take your bullshit,
The one who has boundaries.
right? The one who is making choices of my time. Because, again, we all have the same 24 hours as Beyonce, okay? So
Don't come for our necks like this.
look, we all have the same 24 hours. And if I am making choices about where I am spending my time, you can start to see where some people might feel hurt by those choices I make, right? Because at the end of the day, and again, this is something I've said again and again and again, and if there's one thing you're going to take away from this, it's like you are the center of your life. It's nobody else is the center of your life. You are. And so I have made choices that some people haven't liked because, again, I am putting myself forward. So it means that, I know people don't think I sleep, but I sleep 8 hours a night. Even during the times when it was like, you would think, oh, she can't possibly be sleeping. She's traveling too much. There's too much to do. She's a mom. No, I'm sleeping because I require that in order to be my best. If I want to fight the corporate fight, I need to have like all my faculties. And I understood that very early on. And so that has meant that even in the relationship with my daughter, having a actual conversation with her when she was like 5, about the way I needed to move, the travel that I needed to do, the fact that I wouldn't be around all the time, that when she started to play sports and she would have an important game and knowing that I would have to miss it, or there'd be some function at the school that, all the other parents are coming to, and I would say, I'm not going to make that. But understanding that our relationship, I needed to make her feel as important as possible. And so giving her the veto power to say, now, okay, you have choice. You can say, this thing is really important to me and I need you to be there. And I will actually be there. Now, you can't pull that card every day. So you're going to have to choose when you need me, right? And putting that on the table and therefore making her understand that she's important in the scheduling of my life. And that has carried on. And so even now, even on this trip that I'm taking to Ghana, we live in Los Angeles, and school started the day before I took the flight. I was planned to come on the Sunday. The first day of school was Monday. And she said, I really want you to be here on the first day of school. So I said, okay, fine. I moved it to Tuesday. So that means I've been gone for the first week of school, but she was like, look, I just needed you to be here for one day, the first day, and then that's it. And I changed the flight, so she has real power. It has also been the challenge of, people who love me, who care about my well-being, but whose advice I don't take when it comes to my career. That's a tough one. Have you ever tried to tell your mom she didn't know what she was talking about when it came to your career? Or your best friend, or somebody who's supposed to be a mentor? They love you. They want you to be successful, but they don't always know what's the best thing for you. And so again, putting yourself at the center of your life and not asking for their opinion on everything that you do, every move that you make will put you in more control of your own life. And that changes the dynamic and the relationship. So I know that even though we're talking about love, we have to consider all of the personal relationships. The friends that you've heard, they said the friends who were there for a season, right? And so it's like that thought where it's like, okay, is this friend who is close to me, are they here for just now? And then you can let them go when that relationship changes and not feel badly about it, not think about it constantly, not let it get in your way. Or do you try to hold on to these toxic, terrible situations that you're trying to make work because you've known this person for 8 years? And so for me, it's like been the navigation of all of the relationships in my life, not just the romantic ones.
I think that's so powerful because I've witnessed first. And I think the beauty of being able to host this is because I can validate some of the things you're saying. And I think what I've witnessed firsthand is how you prioritize every relationship in a very wonderful way.
Yeah.
And the way you do it is really interesting because when you're with someone in that moment, that person is your world.
Yeah.
You're so fantastic at that. Yesterday we had Banku at my mom's house. And you would think that my mother was her best friend.
Yeah.
She was like, Auntie, tell me more. At a point, I was you, and I was like, girl, it's time to go home. But one thing that Bose is so excellent at is if she's sitting with you and she's having a relationship with you in that particular moment, you are the center of her world.
Yeah.
She takes everything with such priority, even when it's the littlest of things.
Yeah.
And I think that's why you're able to divide your time and make time for the people that you love. And I think the challenge with most people is we're not very good at managing our time. So I've seen you even learn crip walk and take that with such seriousness. And I'm just eating my chicken like it's just a crip walk.
Right.
But for you, it's so important to kind of balance every relationship, everything that you set your mind to do. And I think that's why your relationships are so effective from my perspective, right? And, I know that every relationship is important because the relationships you have with your family, the relationship you have with your partners, the relationship you have at work is actually what makes you as a person.
Yeah.
But the reason why I think for me, the conversation around dating and, love and romance is so important is because in our current generation and our era, social media, what I'm particularly realizing is how the conversations on romance, particularly for successful women, is dominated by this concept. The successful women are struggling to find love because of the gap, or men think that women have too high expectations because they set the bar high for themselves and now they expect people to match it. So it's just an interesting conversation. And with someone like yourself who has gone through both, whether that's success or love or dating, I think it's important for you to shine some light. But before we even go into that, what I really want to ask you is, growing up, what was your perspective on dating and career?
Dating. Well, my mom was a fashion designer. And then when she met my dad and started having kids, she left her career. So she became a stay-at-home mom, like a good Ghanaian woman, and cooked food every day, to serve for dinner and raise her kids. And that was what was supposed to happen. Now, the funny thing is that in our family, there are 4 girls. So my dad has 4 daughters. He never got his boy. So he put all of his aspirations, expectations on us. I'm the eldest. See? Everybody, yeah, exactly. So you already know what that means.
The elder daughter.
Yes. And all of his ambitions, the things that he was not able to do, he put on my head. And so I knew that the expectation was that I would get married. However, the other expectation that was not said aloud, but was for sure implied, was that I would be a success in business because that's what he wanted. And so it became very complicated for me because it was like, look, the model I had at home was my mom, who essentially gave up her career for her family. Now, she always had a side hustle, so we love that, But that was what was modeled at home, so I could see what a good wife and mother was supposed to be. At the same time, my dad was very successful in his work and had high expectations. I mean, he was the one who said, it's like, if I happened to be able to draw, charcoal on paper, right? And would do that sort of in my spare time. And he would say, oh, if you can draw, then you should be an architect. Or if I happen to be good at the sciences, and biology was, one of my favorite subjects in school. And he was like, oh, okay, well, good. Then you should be a doctor. The expectations were always so high. It was just, there was no compromise. And so I think as a young person in college, even in my early 20s, my expectation for myself was that I would have to do both. And that I would have to be great at both. I would have to be as good as my mom as a wife and mother, and I would have to be as successful and even more successful than my dad as a business person.
How did you handle that pressure?
Oh, girl, therapy. No, I mean, look, I wrote about this in my book that I think in my early career, I couldn't differentiate really between what my dad's hopes and aspirations were for me in my career versus my own. This goes back to the point I was making about, just like making sure that you're at the center, of your own life. Was that I knew that he loved me. He wanted the best. He wants the best for me, but I couldn't distinguish what I wanted for myself versus what he wanted for me. So when he said, "Oh, well, you should be a doctor," well, guess what? I happen to be good in the sciences, so I applied to med school. Of course, that made sense. Why wouldn't I want to be a doctor? Why wouldn't I want to be successful in that way, right? But I also had an eye towards, okay, like if I'm dating for marriage. And so when I got into the relationship with Peter, I was 23 years old. I got married when I was 26 and decided that I didn't want children right away, even though he did. And I negotiated, because marriage is a negotiation. Okay, let's not pretend, that I wanted at least 5 years before we would ever start to try, because I wanted to get my career going. And he was like, okay, that seems like a long time, but 5 years, okay. And so the way I dealt with it was always to try to find, like, how can I do both things? How can I do all things? And how can I do them well? So if I'm going to be successful in business and I'm also going to get married early, then that means I've got to figure out a way where I can keep my career on its tracks while also being married. But that means open communication and negotiation. That's not a surprise. That's not like, oh, not tonight because, I don't want to, you know what I mean? That's like, hey, look, I'm going to be on the pill for about 5 years, okay? And we're having no accidents. So that for me became sort of like the way of being. It's like, how can I make sure that I can remain sane by voicing the things I need? Now, I'm not going to pretend like I was always successful at that. There were many, many, many other issues that I then had to deal with in terms of my own ambition, right? Because Peter was not raised like that. He was the youngest of 6 kids, the baby boy. He could spin. People were like, did you see how far he spin? You know what I'm saying? It was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Meanwhile, my dad is, why did you not turn that spin into a whole condominium? And I'm like, wait, that's not how this works. So I think for me, there were different challenges in my marriage than, what my expectation was in coming in. Like, my expectation was clear. I was like, I have to be as good as my mom, as a wife and mom, and I have to be as good as my dad in business. But those challenges were not the challenges that I faced in my marriage. It's like that expectation for me, I was like, oh, great. No, I can do that. But marriage is not you by yourself. So your expectation doesn't matter.
So I have 2 really big questions off the back of that, right? But even before I get into those 2 questions, my first question is, in terms of selection of Peter, you had a clear vision of your life. You're like, I'm going to be this person because my dad said I should be this person, right?
Yeah.
So you knew you were going to kind of go through this career trajectory that is super high, super elevated. How did that affect your selection? Because I think in the African society, we often talk about women being chosen. But I feel like women, like you don't just get chosen.
Oh, girl.
You do the choosing as well.
Correct.
Exactly.
Yes, you're very, very right.
So in your kind of list, okay, this is what I want in my partner, because I just don't see a world where you don't have an idea of what your partner
you're
looks
right
like.
about that. I mean, I think I always knew the type of person that I wanted to be committed to. And actually, I got really great advice very early on that your spouse would be the most important business decision that you'd ever make. Because if you think about, again, the support that you need at home, the headache that you don't want when you're at work, all of those things are actually business related also. Like, you don't want to go into work thinking about the fight you had at home. You know what I mean? You don't want to be at home voicing your hopes, dreams, and aspirations and get knocked down. So I think sometimes we think that the relationship or your partner decision is one that is separate from the business, but it's actually a business decision you're making, especially if you're ambitious. And so for me, I knew that I needed a spouse who would be supportive of my ambition, of my career aspiration. and this is like the real truth of it, I knew I couldn't marry somebody like my father. Even though his aspirations for me were so big, he was great as a father, but I don't know that I could be married to a man like that. What he required of my mother, I would not be able to manage in a man who was my husband.
Deep.
And so, and look, I love him, I respect him. That was great for them, but not for me. And so I knew that in making a choice about my partner, it would have to be somebody who could support me, cheer me on. You know, if there were challenges at the workplace, because being a Black woman in corporate America is nobody's easy road. And so I'm like, if I came home dejected, punched, kicked, told I wasn't enough, all those things, I needed somebody who was going to say, you're the greatest. You know, not somebody who said, go do the dishes. If I was too tired, girl.
You had a long day and your man's like, where's the jollof rice? I thought you were cooking today.
Exactly. Now, let me tell you, Peter was a terrible cook. So thank God, like, I know how to cook. You know what I mean? But also, it's like, okay, maybe it's not like, you know, go make the jollof, but he'd be like, okay, let's order in.
Yeah. I like that. I can deal with that.
That, like, yeah. So that it's like, because I wasn't about to starve. You know what I mean? But you're right, that I absolutely, and currently still do, go into relationships knowing the type of man that I want in my life. And that makes it very clear for me on who is allowed into my presence. You know, because this is a gift. Like, this is not like it's like, yes, I realize that both partners have to feel like the other is the prize, but I could tell you something, I'm a damn big prize.
I'm the treasure box.
Look, I'm the whole thing. So I recognize that, and perhaps we're going to get into this, but my expectations have also changed as my success has changed.
Interesting.
And so what I needed at 23 and 26 is not what I need at 47. And so things have changed for me over the years, and I am not the same person I was back then. So,
Bozoma, let's actually do a very practical. I want to know what your taste is currently. Like, what is on your list, you know? So I have my list.
Have you written it down?
I feel like, yes, of course. Wait, nobody writes their list down? I think everybody does. No? I think this is like, no. I'm going to read 2 things on my list.
Hey, okay? Wow, you have it in notes or something?
Yes, please.
That's incredible.
That's literally what I'm looking for.
Okay.
I'm looking for it on notes right now. Just give me a moment to find this list.
You do? You've written down what you want?
Yeah, all the girlies do it these days.
Really?
So, mine, I'm going to read my...
I feel like that's a whole therapy session.
You think this is a therapy session?
Yeah.
So, I'm going to say my top 5, the ones I really love, and I want you to...
I have something controversial to say.
Oh, really? Please. Okay, so I'll say it. You have to tell me yours.
I'm going to piss everybody off.
Oh, no. Don't piss me off, please. But, okay, so my top 5, I would say confidence. Confidence is super important for me. I love a proactive man.
Okay.
You have to be proactive. I love ambition.
Good.
I would love a funny person.
Hey,
I need to giggle.
This list is getting okay. All right.
And I would say someone who is at peace. You know, it's just at peace. What's yours?
Girl, okay, first of all, let's talk about the list, okay? And writing down the list. Delete that list.
Oh, my list. Every time I meet someone, I check it.
Everybody who has a list, get your phone out and delete the list. That's right. You know what the thing is? It's like, I feel the same way about these lists as I feel about pro and con lists. I feel the same about every kind of list, okay? The problem is, you're going to write these things down, and the right person is going to walk right past you because they don't match some little thing that's on your list. I'm not saying any of your things are little, okay? But I am saying that I think lists are dangerous. They're great for us to get clarity, you know, to really understand what it is that we want and the things we don't want. But I think they can misguide you too. Because, and this is when I get into my spiritual bag also, because it's like, how do you know what God has for you? You think you're smart enough to be able to write it down and be like, God, this is exactly what I want. Okay, that's fantastic. But maybe God has something different for you that you don't even know you need. And so now here you are, check, 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 check. You check yourself into the wrong box. Meanwhile, you had all these other things that you skipped because you were busy looking at your list down in your phone, updating it every 5 months. Oh, I got this thing, but I didn't like him, and so now I need this new part.
He wasn't funny enough.
He wasn't funny enough. So I need funnier, God. God, give me funnier. You know what I mean?
Give me Trevor Noah.
Meanwhile, God is like, you're the comedian. Meanwhile, you're the comedian in the family, and he's supposed to be over here applauding your jokes. But you're looking for the comedian.
I
You
can
know
deal
what I
with
mean?
that, actually.
And so it's like, I have always felt the same about lists. By the way, the pro and con list that you do also for your career, like, oh, should I take this job or not? And then you're over here, oh, these are the benefits, and then these are the cons. Throw that thing out. Throw it out. You got to go with your gut. When you were in the conversation, when you were in the interview, did you feel good? Did you like the people? Did you feel that this is the place where you should spend your time, the next 5 years of your life? But we're so busy with the pro and con list that we forget to actually hone the intuition that we have. That is the gift from God. That intuition, you cannot beat it. I tell you, trust me on that. I have made more business decisions based on my intuition than anything else. Not research or data, not somebody's recommendation, because somebody will tell you, oh, this person is so powerful, you should get to know them, blah, blah, blah. And then you meet them and they give you the ick. You meet them and something in your spirit isn't right. But you say, oh, well, this other person said they were so powerful and so connected, so I have to get to know them. They're the people who are going to betray you, knock you down, steal your ideas, and make you feel worse. They're going to knock you 10 steps back. If you listen to your intuition, you probably would have met the person next to them who's actually going to elevate you. And so my point is that, like, when we make these lists like this, what happens is we get so focused on the detail of that list that we miss the actual blessing. You're not here listening to your intuition. How do you know that your soulmate didn't just walk by? You're so busy over here looking at your list, And so for me, it's like, look, like I said, my tastes have changed, the needs have changed, but I would say that they are, they're softer needs. They're like, and when I say soft, I don't mean that like I need like, mushy person. I'm saying that they're not so practical. Like, it's not like, oh, this age or this income or this career or any of those things. And I recognize that that can be a controversial thing to say, because people will be like, oh, well, but don't you want a successful man, especially for a successful woman? And won't that cause conflict? Not for the man who's right for me. No, because why couldn't he be a plumber and be super excited that his wife is bringing home, many, many, many figures? It's like, perhaps that's the person that I need. Maybe the person I need is the one who doesn't have a travel schedule I do. So he can be at home and be consistent, go to work and come home, and they all can go watch her games instead of me running around. So for me, it's like, look, and what I mean by like, what is changed for me from when I was 26 and 47 is that the type of support I need has changed dramatically. And so I am now in a place where I'm thinking more about the intuitive things that I need and how do I feel when I'm in the person's presence, more than I am checking off the lists or the boxes.
Right. So my pushback to that is this. I think for me, the reason why the list is useful is because we all have that person that we meet and, this person is 6'4", handsome. And now you're not even checking for the things that you thought were important. You're just like, you're so blinded by the experience you're having with this person that you can't even have an objective view.
Yeah, but that's the problem with your
is.
intuition.
Fair.
That's the problem with your intuition, not the list. So what if he's 6'4" and handsome? Maybe that is your man. But you know what? You probably missed the ick. Because I guarantee you, if he wasn't for you, you missed that. You weren't paying attention. You're out here lost in his 6'4"-ness.
Exactly. So I need the list.
No, you don't need the list. The list is going to further confuse you. Like, what you need is to listen to your intuition. What you need to do is hone that. Stop depending on all these other things. And look, I say intuition. Some people say the spirit. It's your gut. It's, all of the things. You just ask, like, how do you know? Okay, I'm going to explain that right now. Like, I see my intuition, and don't think I'm crazy, but it's like, as if like, it's like a friend who's sitting next to me, right? Now, let's pretend my intuition is Vidette. And I asked Vidette, like, what do you think about this 6'4" handsome man? And she's like, ugh, he's kind of gross. I don't know if I like him so much. And I'm like, girl, shut up. And I go out with him. Yeah. And then he destroys my life. And Vidette is like, and then the next one comes along and he's 5'7". And I'm like, Vidette, what do you think about this guy? She's like, he's it. He's so great. And I'm like, girl, please, he's not tall enough. And then the third time I come, I'm like, oh, what about this person? And Vidette's like, no, I don't like him either. He's not as gross as the 6'4" guy, but he's not it for you. And I'm like, girl, I'm doing it anyway. Eventually, she's gonna stop talking to me. Eventually, she's gonna get quieter and quieter and quieter. That's what happens to your intuition. So the honing of that, the practice of that is actually just that. Like when you're getting to know a new friend, it's the same behavior where it's like, if you ask them their opinion about something and they give you some advice, go with that advice. Because the next time you come to them, they're going to give you more. They're going to give you more. They're going to give you more. Think about if that person was like psychic. Would you not ask them every day? Girl, what's going to happen? You know what I mean? I feel like my intuition is like that. My intuition knows things before I know them. I mean, I think it's the Spirit of God within me that is doing that. But so many times we ignore that based on like the practicalities of some math, based on this list you've written, besides listening to the Spirit that is trying to tell you where to go. And so how do you increase that? How do you make that more powerful? Listen and begin with like the small behaviors. Like I say things like, it's like maybe you're going out and you're planning an outfit. Don't call your friend and ask her what she thinks about your outfit. Do you like your outfit? Do you feel good in it? The next time you have to make a business decision about a job or something else, don't call your friends. Don't call your mentor. Don't call your parents. Don't call the person that you think is ahead of you in that industry and ask them what they think. What do you think? How do you feel? Pay attention to those things. Go with it. Oh my God, how terrible. Jump. Hey. Now all of a sudden you're scared because you don't trust yourself. You think you don't know. But what if you did know more than everybody else? If you trusted that. And for me, I trust my intuition so clearly. It has not failed me yet. I promise you. It's like every time I've made a move, and like even going back to the business discussion, right? The success has many authors. So many people think they're responsible for my success. And you can imagine that people look at it now and they're like, oh, I knew she was going to be great. She's fantastic. Look at all the places she's been. If I explain to you every single move and how people try to dissuade me from making those moves, every single time you would cry. And if it were you, you might have just stayed. Because here we are always asking somebody else for their opinion. If I had actually asked, and most of the time I didn't, but they wanted to give it to me anyway, because that's also what happens. Because that's the other discipline on the other side that I didn't talk about. And sometimes you don't ask, but they're going to give it to you anyway. And they're going to sow those seeds of doubt and all those things. And so then you don't move because you're like, they told me. And then when it goes bad, they're going to say, but I told you, why didn't you listen? But the truth of the matter is that, no, you're not always going to get it right. But I promise you'll get it more right than you won't if you were listening to somebody else. How do they know? You think they know better for your life than you do for your own? Why? Who gave them that authority? They're not walking the path you're walking, even if the people are doing things in the industry that you want to do. They are not there with you. They haven't walked the path that you've walked. It's like when people ask me to be their mentor, most of the time I'm like, no, not because I don't want to give keys and lessons. I do that all day long. But I'm like, I'm not going to do it because you're going to depend on me to tell you what to do. And that will be a disservice. I would actually be doing a disservice to you. What you need to do is hone the understanding of your own spirit. So it's like sometimes, like every time when you leave this place, maybe this is for us to know and the folks who are listening on the podcast. From this moment forward, every decision that you have to make that you're tempted to ask somebody else for their opinion, don't do it. Just try it. Don't do it. Listen to yourself. Maybe you just need to sit for a minute and be like, oh. And I know it's going to be nerve-wracking. You're going to be like, but I don't know. I don't know what to do. Yes, you do. Stop telling yourself you don't know. You do know. Like, get deep, get quiet, get still. Pray if you need to. Do whatever you need to do. But don't ask another human being what you should do. And your intuition will get stronger. It'll get so strong that sometimes you'll walk into a room and have to turn around and walk out. I've done that on many occasions. I was about to do that today. No, I'm kidding.
Hey!
No. I knew I was supposed to be here. In fact, my intuition told me I was supposed to be here.
You even wore white, just like me.
Exactly. The
Your intuition was strong.
The intuition told me to wear white. You know what I mean? But I think that's the same way for the relationships. And so breaking it back to the romantic side of it all, it's like even for the mistakes I've made in relationships, like romantic relationships, as it relates to my career, I don't regret them because I listened to my intuition. I was listening to my own spirit, And I do believe that there are reasons why those things either didn't work out or the lesson I was supposed to learn in it or how it would help me in the next thing.
I think one thing I've known about you is, you've always been a contrarian, right? Whether someone's looking at you online, seeing how you dress to the corporate space.
Like my boobs are out?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's who you are, right? You're just a badass, right? But I think one thing that you said to me, I remember when I asked you, hey, so how do you feel about dating someone who isn't earning as much as you? And your response was so interesting. You said to me, Vidette, how many people are earning as much as me?
Yeah.
And that was real.
Those are facts.
That was so real.
Yeah.
And I guess the reason why that statement in itself is so contrarian is because I feel like for women, right? Mm-hmm. When you date someone who perhaps is not in the same tax bracket as you, perhaps doesn't earn as much as you, it's actually seen as a negative, right? Mm-hmm. Especially when you're a very successful woman.
Yeah.
And for men, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
Men can date someone in a lower tax bracket or someone in a higher tax bracket. Yeah. What are your thoughts on these kind of expectations and stereotypes placed on women?
Oh, it's so terrible, isn't it? I mean, it really is because, unfortunately, I think that obviously has to do more with other people than it has to do with me. The danger comes when you internalize those same feelings, and that's why I answered the question the way I answered it when you asked me, because I recognize that is a barrier to some men. Their barriers have nothing to do with me. Like their barriers are their barriers. And so I have surrendered to that thought that it's like, hey, look, I'm not going to convince you that I am dateable, even if I make more money than you, just so that you can have an attitude and insecurities throughout our relationship. Like, I'd rather just not date you. And so I had to surrender that idea. And this is where it's difficult. I had to surrender the idea that maybe as my success grew, I wouldn't find somebody who'd be able to manage the success I have or the ambition I have, because it's astronomical. Like my ambition is still skyrocketing. Even though I've retired, I am not done doing what I'm supposed to do. And so it requires that if that person didn't come along, I would have to be okay with that. And that's a difficult thing to do and say, especially when it's like, I mean, this is maybe TMI, I probably shouldn't say it, but like, I remember 3 months after my husband died, my dad was like, who's going to take care of you? Don't you need to get married?
3 months.
3 months.
Man did not let you rest.
Hey, I was like,
he said, who's next?
Yeah. He was like, oh, but you're young and, and I was like, oh man, is that like what I'm supposed to be doing? Like, really, But I had to surrender the idea. And I know that is probably not the answer that we want.
I'm 29. I don't want that answer, Boz.
I know you don't want that answer.
I want to experience love and magic.
I know you do. And I believe you can have it all. I really do. Look, I believe I can have it all too. And so my point about surrender isn't that I surrender to be lonely. It is that I surrender that mine will find me and that I will find mine. And I don't have to force anything. And I don't have to like compromise or feel berated just so that I can be in a relationship or to stay in a relationship. Because look, I've had the switcheroo too. The people who say they're fine with the thing you're doing? Yeah. Hey. And then that first vacation where you're just like, why are we staying there? I think we can stay at the Ritz-Carlton, don't you think? And then they're like, oh, so you want to stay at the Ritz? Yes, I do. And I'll pay for it, actually. Yeah. Hey, then it's a problem. Meanwhile, wouldn't you feel better at the Ritz-Carlton? We would all have a better time. So why are you even arguing with me? You know what I mean? But, man, it was a terrible situation. But I really had to leave him at the hotel where he was staying.
Wait,
I mean,
you left him in the hotel, went to...
Yes, and that's when I knew the relationship was over.
Okay.
I
Makes
was like,
sense.
hey, because like it was just such a switch up, yo. I was like, you clearly said you were okay, but you're not okay because you want to be in charge, you want to be the boss man. And I'm saying like our experience would be better if we went over there. And I can afford it. So let's go. I'm not gonna hold it over your head. I'm not gonna be like, hey, how many berries are you eating today? Because I'm paying for that. I'm not saying that. But and that's like, some of the more like practical stuff, but there's emotional things that come with that too, right? Which are harder to identify and put pinpoints on. They're the microaggressions that come and the things that are said or the sarcasm, which, or the ways that, people want to control you so that you don't seem bigger than them. I've had relationships where, and this was before I was more well known, but I was still doing really well, where it's just like, oh, well, don't say what you do, if we go out. Because he didn't want, people to know that I was in a higher position. He felt embarrassed by that. And I'm like,
that the intuition kicked in then.
Girl, my intuition kicked him in the face.
Not the list.
In fact,
there was no list, but the intuition was there.
The intuition told me, girl, get out. You know what I mean? But that's the thing is that I think that the expectations for us as women who want to be successful, who become successful and feel the pressures of society or, other people's expectations on where you're supposed to be in the wealth ladder, that is not my problem. And I've had to surrender to that.
Wow, that is so strong. And I think the underlying theme is that knowledge of yourself.
Yes.
Is what is dictating how you navigate this space, right? Yeah. And I think the challenge for a lot of people now is there's so many voices, especially as we soak in social media. Yeah. And it's very difficult to actually have a very strong mind, particularly in this regard, when you are navigating the space of life.
Yeah.
And we can go on. But in the interest of time, I think there's an important question I want to explore with you. R.I.P. to your late husband, Peter. Mm-hmm. May his lovely soul rest in peace again. Seeing who you have evolved into now, many, many years after his passing, would you still marry Peter if he was alive today?
You mean would I, like if I met him today, would I marry him today? Ooh, that's a hard question.
And why? Yes or no, why?
Oh man, that's a tough question. It's a hard question because, when it's like, I think the expectation in marriage is that you're not supposed to change. You're supposed to stay the same. People say that all the time, like when you're in a relationship, if you've ever been in a long-term relationship and, somebody's like, oh, never change the way you are. And it's like, but that's impossible. Us as human beings, that's the whole point of being, is that these experiences are supposed to change us and grow us and evolve us. And so it would be actually a disservice to God and his gifts if you remain the same. And so I don't know. And maybe the answer then is no. That if I ran into Peter today, that I would marry him. He was the right man for me when I met him at 23. And he was the right man for me at the beginning of my career. Now, the little known fact, which I did write about in my book, but I don't necessarily talk about all the time, is that we were separated actually when he got sick. I didn't go to a divorce lawyer only because I wanted him to also come along, and he was not on the same page as me. He did not want to get divorced. I did. And the truth of the matter of that is that everything happened like at the same time. Lael had just been born. And again, just keeping it 100. Even after the 5 years, I still didn't want to be pregnant, to be honest. And they were difficult. I had a very, very difficult pregnancy, and I was resentful of it. And so Lael she had just turned a year, and it was such a tough year. It was so hard. Because it's like, it's hard enough being a new mom, and it's hard being a new mom when you don't want to be a mom. And I was also, it was also at the same time that my rocket ship had just started to launch. I left PepsiCo. I was at Pepsi twice. So the first time, Lael was about like 8 months old or so when I left because I didn't feel like my career was moving fast enough there. And I got my first job as a CMO. And she was 8 months old.
Wow.
And Peter was not supportive of that move. He felt like, you're a new mom, we're new parents, we've got enough going on, neither of us are really sleeping. Don't you think you should stay in the job that is, consistent, blah, blah. You need to spend more time at the office if you take this job. Meanwhile, my intuition was telling me it is time to go. You cannot stay at this job any longer because you're going to be in the middle forever. You got to take the risk and go get the leadership job that is meant for you. And against his advice, I took the job. I quit my Pepsi job and took the job. Now I'm going to tell you, it's like the challenge was that job was a disaster. I got fired under a year. And at the same time that the job was going badly, I was also realizing I no longer wanted to be married. And part of it was due to the fact that I didn't feel like he supported my career. Or supported my motherhood. And so I was like, hey, look, I don't want to be in a relationship like this. Now, everybody thought I was crazy. People were like, oh, you have such a good man. You have a young child. Like, why would you leave? Like everything is right on paper. Work it out. Marriage is not easy. Stay in there. And meanwhile, I was like, no, I don't think this marriage is for me anymore. And this job is not for me anymore. And I need to leave everything. And everybody thought I was crazy. Because they were just like, well, you just want to quit when things get hard. But the truth of the matter is that I was really leaning into everything that I knew was right for me. Not what my pastor thought was right for me, not what my mom thought was right for me, not even what my best friends thought was right for me, because they all advised me to stay too. But I knew I had to leave because, one, now that I was a mother, I didn't want Lael to grow up with a bitter woman. Some of us, let me say all, but some of us have been the consequence of somebody's bitterness and unhappiness in their own life. I didn't want Lael to have to grow up with a mom who was angry at being married, who was angry in her career. I wanted her to know the joyful, happy person that everybody else loved. How would I be that at home when I was so unhappy? And so, and I was 34 years old. And so the long answer to your question is that Peter wasn't the right husband for me at 34. So I don't think he'd be the right husband for me at 47.
That is so deep and so real. Thank you so much for sharing, your personal life like that with us. So the last question to wrap it up, sorry guys, we need to end this. Thank you so much, Rachel, for having us, is what does the right husband look like then?
Hey! And look at how she's playing with her hair.
I just want to know.
While she's asking this question.
I just need to know.
What does the right husband look like right now?
What does the right husband look like right now? You've been through so much in life. You've met so many different types of men. Mm-hmm. You know yourself even more.
Yeah.
You know what is important to you, what is not important to you.
Yeah. So
give us just a glimpse into what the right husband looks like.
Well, I am in a relationship.
Ooh.
That I don't talk about publicly, but I'll just tell you that. Well, I guess it's not just you. It's this podcast. Look at me. I forgot for a second that I'm sitting here in front of everybody on this microphone. But I'm really very happy in the relationship I'm in right now, because I am in a pivot in my life. I am probably the most insecure I have been ever in my career. So by the way, I don't even know if this relationship would have worked 5 years ago, because I was in a different place. I was like, you couldn't tell me shit. You know what I mean? And today I am in a much more vulnerable space because I'm making a shift in my life. I am trying something new. Every day I have some doubt about it and about myself and my own abilities, that he provides comfort and encouragement in a way that is different from what I needed 5 years ago. And my hope is that, should we continue in this relationship, that we would continue to be able to evolve together. Um, I have prayed about it, so let's not pretend as if, like, even though I don't have the list you have, I still pray about myself. I think sometimes, like, we've been told, like, pray for your partner, and which I think is a good thing, but we forget to pray for ourselves too. We get to pray for our own healing, for our own, like, soft space for somebody else to land. We forget to pray that we need the fixing too. We think we have to pray for the perfect person to show up. Meanwhile, you're over here disaster. And so I pray about the traumas that I have faced in ways that make me not soft. I pray about the career ambition that I've had that has made me sometimes difficult to navigate for a man and for a relationship. I have prayed about my issues with trust, given that I have been betrayed before. And all of those things he has shown up to be the answer to the prayer. So that's where I am now.
The dream husband is the man who is the answer to the prayer. Is
Amen.
What we'll say.
That's what it is.
Well, thank you so much, Bozoma, for joining us on Cashing Up with Vidette. This has been a lovely conversation. We always have lovely conversations. Super excited because I definitely will invite you for part 2 because we always have a lot to chit chat about.
Wow, part 2.
Part 2 for sure.
Just made me commit to that.
Maybe after the second baby.
Hey! Wow! You're my mom now.
Well, thank you guys for being such a great audience. Thank you for your excitement. Thank you for everything you brought into this conversation. I really don't want to do questions, but if someone is burning, I will take just one question.
Hey, one question.
Okay, one. That's it. It's a live podcast. Please catch her for 2 minutes before she leaves. Go on.
Hi, my name is Aku. Okay, thank you. My name is Aku, by the way. Lovely to meet you again. I was at the December event. That was lovely. So when I saw this, I was like, I'm out.
Yes.
Vidette, thank you for putting this together. My question is about grief and building community. I love the touch points on friendship because that is a very deep relationship to navigate as well. Yeah. So with navigating grief, how do you build community after when people thought they wanted to help? That's not necessarily the help that you needed in that moment. And with mine, I lost my mom. So that was basically cutting a different cord altogether and feeling like I was flailing and trying to find my own feet again. And what do I want for me versus what she wanted for me, etc. But now, not everybody's going to understand that you don't have the capacity for everybody else. And you need to go inward and talk to yourself and figure out how do you do life without this woman that was a powerhouse. So how do you build community after big losses and big shifts in friendships and the pivots? How do you do that?
Oh, that is such a deep question.
Very deep.
Thank you.
First, I'm sorry for your loss also. Devastating loss. The thing is, very much the way I've been talking about intuition, and one thing we didn't talk about really was just the timing of things, and how sometimes we're also prisoners to time. And we think that, I have to do this by this time, and I have to do this by that time, and how that also gets in your way. It's not just the list, it's the time that you've put against the list. Hey, wow, it's just like it becomes such a disaster for us, But in your case, what I'm talking about, and mine, when it comes to grief, is that, again, I think that people put time around what your grief is supposed to look like. My dad put time around what my grief was supposed to look like before I started looking for a new husband. My friends put time around what my grief was supposed to look like before we went out on the dating scene and I'm with them at the club. It's like my daughter put time until recently on what it's supposed to look like before I commit to anyone again. That's part 2.
That's
a whole nother conversation, But the real truth of it is that, like, nobody can dictate what that time looks like. And that's what happens with the community, is that this again, it's like kind of a circular conversation, but it comes back to intuition, which is just like, but what do you feel? It's like, do you have to connect to the community again right now? Like, perhaps there's part of the community that you shouldn't actually connect to. If you feel desperately that you need to connect to the community or to new friends or maybe to old friends that have disappointed you, my question to you is, why do you feel like you need to do that? Because the answer is somewhere within your own spirit and in your own grief. Is it that you need the familiarity of the people who knew your mom? Or maybe her death was almost a gift in helping you to cut them out because they're not supposed to be for you. And so, like, really going to understand what it is about the community or rebuilding those friendships that you actually need versus what you don't need. And perhaps it's time for some new friendships as well. Perhaps the community is actually people who have suffered the way you have, who understand what you have. And finding those people again is like, I do depend a lot on prayer. And one of my best friends is Lovey Ajayi Jones, who lives in the US. She's of Nigerian descent, and we've known each other for a long time. And one of our prayers that she's said more publicly than I have is that, it's like, God, help me find my helpers, And I add, and let me recognize them when they come. So for you, perhaps that's a prayer that you can say, is that help me find my community and let me recognize them when they appear. I wish you the best.
Excellent.
Yes.
All right. Yay for us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Danisha, the owner of Ritual. You've been such a great host. We really appreciate you giving us your wonderful, beautiful space. I really encourage everyone to come here. Danisha has done a great job of putting this amazing listening bar and cafe together. I want you guys to, spend as much money as you can.
Yes.
I want to say thank you to Reagan and the videography, photography team. Thank you to the Sorta Chalet team. Where are all of them? They vanished. I think they're outside. And thank you for everyone who showed up, whether you were invited personally or whether you decided to join based on the poster. And thank you to the team at Ritual. You guys have been amazing. So I hope you all have a lovely evening. And hopefully we see you again at our next podcast session with Cashing Up with Vidette. Thank you.
Oh, great. Nice work.
Excellent.